Hi there and welcome to the briefing room. I'm ABC News Political Director Rick Klein, joined by my colleague David Curley, and we are here at the headquarters of FEMA in Washington, D.C. at the National Response Coordination Center. This is a room that you've been in before, David. What's going on behind us?
So you really see this room at full operation with a hurricane like this coming in. And what you can see are all the different agencies, and they're represented here. And each federal government agency, state officials, you can see Red Cross is here, you can see National Park Service. This is the coordination center, basically, where all the information is going to come in. This will help FEMA with their response to this Hurricane Florence, which is just starting. Some of the bands of rain and the wind are hitting and lashing part of the coast down in the southeast now. This is where the response starts from. They've actually done a lot of work in the week coming up to this. We've seen the forecast for several days now. They've been positioning a lot of materials to get ready for the storm and the aftermath of the storm.
And let's check in right now with Dan Kanuski. Come on, join us. Dan, thank you for being with us. Deputy Administrator for National Response here at FEMA. Tell us what the most urgent task for FEMA is right now in these critical hours before the storm hits the Carolinas.
So we want to make sure we're ready to go for any requests we might get as soon as this storm passes. Now, right now, tropical storm force winds are currently striking many areas in the Carolinas. That means local responders and state responders are going to have to take shelter. So if you haven't evacuated, you're probably going to have to take shelter and hunker down and hope for the best. I hope people are out of their flood zones. I hope they're away from the coast. But if not, those people that do stay behind, local, state, and federal responders are going to try to support as best as we can after the storm passes.
I don't think a lot of Americans understand that FEMA's job is not to be the first responder necessarily. That's the state and the locals. Your job is to assist and coordinate, but you have positioned a lot of material. Are you prepared? Are you ready for this storm?
I think we're ready. We have personnel, equipment, and commodities just outside the impact area, ready to go in after that storm hits. Now, that can include specialized assets like swift water rescue teams. Those swift water rescue teams were sourced from throughout the United States, from teams like our urban search and rescue team, teams you might be familiar with. There's a special team, that is focused on swift water rescue. You can imagine that might be something we need in the aftermath of a disaster like this.
And how important is it to have all these different agencies working with the people, their counterparts at individual agencies? This is quite a team you see behind us of people that represent different parts of the government.
Absolutely. If you look here, you'll see a cross-section of the federal government. You'll see 15 emergency support functions. That is basically a division of all these agencies working together. For example, ESF 8, that's health and medical. The Department of Health and Human Services leads that. That means HHS is responsible for coordinating all of the health and medical response for the United States federal government. A lot of that coordination happens here with the representatives here, and a lot of it happens at their headquarters, at HHS headquarters just down the street. So coordinating is actually much bigger than even you just see right here.
But this is about sharing information, so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, it's a nerve center of sharing information, but it's also about filling requirements. So if there's a resource need on the ground, whether it be a federal official on the ground saying we need more assistance of this type, or a state or local official saying they need assistance, eventually it'll make its way here. It'll be worked here, and across the entire federal government, that resource need will be met. Like a helicopter, for example. If someone in the field needs a helicopter, they can't just pick up a phone and say, I need a helicopter. We need to work that. We need to make sure that we're totally coordinated to make sure that the closest, most capable helicopter gets to that location.
All right, Dan Kanuski, thank you for being with us. Get back to your job. I know it's going to be a busy couple of days for you here over at FEMA.
Great, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dan. And David, we've been hearing from the White House throughout the day about the briefings that President Trump has been doing in trying to coordinate federal government response to this, but a tweet has overtaken everything, as often happens with President Trump. This one questioning the death toll of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, saying 3,000 people did not die in the two hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico, and went on to say that this was done by Democrats in order to make me look as bad as possible. Want to immediately turn to the mayor of San Juan, who I know is with us by phone right now, Carmen Yulín Cruz. Mayor Cruz, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Just give us your initial reaction when you heard about this tweet, and what you feel like this means at this moment for the people of your city and the people of Puerto Rico.
Well, first of all, it was unbelievable, to be able to go to those depths to ensure that the truth is covered up. There this is an independent study by George Washington University. There was another one done by Harvard University. And people around the world saw the devastation, and not only what happened with the storm itself, but what happened after the storm. The president still continues to sing his own praises because, as he himself said it, for him, it's an unsung success. I can tell you that the conversation that I heard just before was quite different than the conversation that we did not hear in Puerto Rico. We personally in San Juan hosted HHS doctors and nurses that had no place to stay all of a sudden, and they had no marching orders. And they stayed at the Coliseum of Puerto Rico 1 or 2 days until they got their marching orders. So this coordination, and I quote, ready to go for any request they get, that wasn't the case in Puerto Rico. In fact, FEMA should understand that standard operating procedures don't always work. In Puerto Rico, they were asking us to tell our constituents to go to the internet to report any damages. They were asking us to send requests via internet. We have no electricity. We have no internet. So we hope, for the sake of the people of North Carolina and South Carolina, that the president remembers that his job now is not about tooting his own horn, is not about he can spin, and it's certainly not about negating the sorrow and the pain that we have gone through and that the people of North and South Carolina will go through. The president seems to be totally alienated from reality. Perhaps in his own inner circle in Trump land, he did a good job. But when 3,000 lives die on your watch, you should never, ever feel like you've done a good job.
You know, emergency response should never be politicized. Are you concerned that as we're having a storm come into the United States right now, that there's been this distraction?
I'm concerned that the president didn't learn the lessons that were so harshly learned in Puerto Rico. I'm concerned that he thinks this is about him and about how he can spin it. This is not the day for the president to be not only alienating his own constituents, but this is a time of him to offer comfort. And the president came to Puerto Rico and threw paper towels at us. That just doesn't go and jive with his story of being ready. No, this is not a good news story in Puerto Rico. And he can try and spin it all he wants. And this thing about the Democrats are making him look bad. You know, no one makes you look bad if it's so evident that you did a good job. And the president's attention should be turned to South Carolina and North Carolina, and he should respect the dignity and the pain and the sorrow inflicted badly by the neglect that he allowed his administration to bestow upon Puerto Rico.
The mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulín Cruz, thank you for being with us on a very busy day. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to turn the conversation now, David, and bring in Luis Miranda, who is the founding president of the Hispanic Federation, a former Senate aide for Democrats. And I want to get into a bit of the reality of what this death toll represents. We saw the authors of this study from George Washington University talk about how they did this methodologically. Of course, deaths from a storm, it's not quite like normal death counts from a tragedy like a shooting, say, because the impact is felt for a long time. But Mr. Miranda, what has the reality been like for people who suffered, either those who suffered fatally, who died in the aftermath, or are still struggling now to get their lives back on track?
Everyone knows that many people died, even when all of this was happening. We knew that afterwards, the fact that there was no electricity, the fact that aid did not arrive fast enough, caused total turmoil in the island. And it has been months and months, almost a year, now on September 20th, when we celebrate the first anniversary of Hurricane Maria hitting Puerto Rico, where communities are still struggling to get their life in orders, where thousands of families are still in the United States not knowing when the judge is going to say that FEMA can no longer pay for the hotels, where they have been staying now for months and months and months. So this is not a normal occurrence, and the president should know that he's simply not telling the truth.
You know, we heard from Brock Long the other day speaking about Puerto Rico and some of these issues that basically said the Commonwealth wasn't ready, the territory wasn't ready, and that FEMA came in and had to be the first responder, had to basically take over the entire operation.
I think we say in Puerto Rico, de tal palo, tal astilla. People hire people like them. The fact is that FEMA did its own report where they indicated, number one, that a lot of the assistance, the FEMA resources and assets that they had in Puerto Rico were transferred to the Virgin Islands because of Irma, and that they were ill prepared to deal with Puerto Rico. FEMA, in its own report, said that. But it's the president and all of the people around him trying to recreate history and sort of bombard us with all of this fake news that they create.
I want to play some of what Brock Long, the FEMA administrator, said just today when asked about this. They weren't going into detail here at FEMA in terms of defending the tweet, but he was asked by a couple of different reporters, including our Mary Alice Parks, about the successes or failures in Puerto Rico. Take a listen.
I believe that these people worked around the clock, put 100% into Puerto Rico, and we kept Puerto Rico from complete and total collapse. No doubt about it. What we have to do now is how do we rebuild Puerto Rico? The conversation needs to be around how do you rebuild the Commonwealth in a more economically and resilient fashion.
I have.
So, Luis Miranda, what do you think about that?
I have no doubt that all those people who were behind him during Maria, all those people who are there behind you guys dealing with the Carolinas are working very, very hard. No one is challenging that. But the fact is that Puerto Rico totally collapsed. So to say that they stopped the collapse, it's a lie. Puerto Rico collapsed. My family didn't have electricity in my town in Vega Alta for 8 months. So to try to indicate now that somehow they were saviors in Puerto Rico when their own report indicates that that didn't happen, it's simply a lie. The president lied. The FEMA people who are trying to recreate and redo reality are simply not telling the truth.
All right, Luis Miranda, thank you for being with us. Appreciate the time you spent on this issue and appreciate you coming in to talk to us.
Thank you.
And David Curley, another headline today, jarring under the circumstances, a story broken by Politico overnight that talked about an Office of Inspector General investigation into Brock Holt, we just talked about, the head of FEMA, about some private travel that he's potentially, allegedly used using FEMA vehicles. I want to talk to the reporter who broke that story, helped break that story from Politico, Daniel Lippman. And Daniel, give us a sense of what this investigation is looking at. And I'm also curious about the timing and how your reporting led up to this moment, a moment where FEMA is so much in the news. If there was any relation to this OIG investigation and the timing with FEMA under a microscope right now.
Yeah, we had heard about this a few months ago, but we could never nail it down. And I got a tip about this yesterday morning, and so we spent all day working it. Basically, what the IG is looking at is Brock Long would routinely travel on Thursday nights or Friday mornings from FEMA headquarters to North Carolina, where he and his family live full time. And the issue is you can't use a Chevy Suburban without authorization if you're going on a personal trip back home for the weekend. So he spends the weekdays in D.C. and then goes home on the weekends. But the issue is about taxpayer dollars.
And were you able to come up with a total amount?
We were not able to.
Of taxpayer dollars, I'm sorry.
They're still looking at that right now. The IG investigation hasn't concluded. This was sparked by an accident that the Chevy Suburban got into, and there's also questions about this aide who accompanied him and drove him He was put up in hotels on taxpayer dollars in North Carolina on the weekend, and they don't think that he got authorization for him just to put up his drivers up in hotels without getting that cleared from above. And this has sparked a rupture with DHS, and Kirstjen Nielsen, the DHS secretary, confronted Brock Long a few weeks ago and asked him to consider resigning, according to one of our sources, although other sources dispute that and said it was more of a professional check-in.
Well, as everybody has seen in our program here, we did talk to Brock Long earlier today. He has seen your article, and this is what he had to tell us earlier about this story.
Every day we work very closely with the OIG and GAO to make meaningful improvements and make sure that we're running programs and policies according to regulation. And bottom line is we'll continue to fully cooperate with any investigation. I would never intentionally run a program incorrectly. Bottom line is if we made mistakes on the way a program was run, then we'll work with the OIG to get those corrected. Doing something unethical is not part of my DNA, and it's not part of my track record my whole entire career.
Daniel?
Yeah, what do you think? Daniel, what do you make of that? You were looking to get comment from FEMA. They've been kicking the questions over to the Office of Inspector General. Not quite a denial from him. There's this investigation still ongoing.
Yeah, and I think once it concludes, then we'll see if he stays at the agency. You can imagine that a guy like Brock Long, who is supposed to be in charge of this stuff, for him to leave the office on Thursday nights routinely, and especially when you have a more active hurricane season the last couple of years than before, that just has sent the wrong message to some FEMA employees. And so, of course, he's going to say that they're going to try to reconcile differences with the IG, but it may not be up to him. If John Kelly calls him up and says you have to resign, Kirstjen Nielsen doesn't want you there anymore, that could escalate the situation.
All right, Daniel Lippman from Politico, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And David, one other political headline today.
This is a bizarre one.
Really strange. And I've covered a lot of these. You covered a lot of these over the years. What happened today with the Supreme Court nomination of Brett Kavanaugh was odd, and we're going to have a lot to report out in the coming days around this. But the basics are that the Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats asked for a delay on the nomination vote. Not really that unusual. But what is unusual here is that Senator Dianne Feinstein, a senior Democrat on that committee, has acknowledged that she has information, an anonymous letter that she passed on to the FBI that it's now investigating. Very late for this to be happening. We want to check in with Ali Rogan. I know, Ali, this has been quite the buzz on Capitol Hill. A lot of the other Democrats on the committee don't even know what Senator Feinstein is sitting on here. How has this gone over?
Yeah, I want to make a few things clear. There's no indication that the vote in the committee on Brett Kavanaugh was delayed because of these new revelations. That, I think, was long the plan. Democrats had the ability to delay the vote, and that's what they were always going to do. It's also not clear how many Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee have been made aware of the contents of this letter. It is simply that they are being absolutely scrupulous about not talking about it and deferring everything to Dianne Feinstein herself, who is also being pretty mum. As you laid out, what ABC has confirmed is that Feinstein received information regarding Judge Kavanaugh and has referred it to federal investigative authorities, and that individual strongly, this is from her written statement today, strongly requested confidentiality, declined to come forward or press the matter forward, and Feinstein has honored that decision. So again, this we don't exactly know who on the committee has this information. Now, what ABC has not been able to confirm, I want to make that very clear that this is reporting coming from other outlets, is that this letter was regarding an allegation of sexual misconduct toward the letter's author. So again, a lot of things that we don't know but are coming to light about this allegation. But it does make you wonder, Rick, why it seems that this is something that if they had had this letter during Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, they would have brought it up to him. So that, to me, gives an indication of when this might have come to light to Senator Feinstein.
But what do we know? This is like so many other issues that we're dealing with. including Mueller and whatnot. It's an investigation. It's ongoing now, apparently, just starting, so we really have no idea how long that might take. Have you gotten any indication from the Republican side whether this will affect the schedule?
We do not, at this point, have any sense that it's going to affect the schedule that Republicans have laid out. Chairman Chuck Grassley on the Judiciary Committee told reporters today that he actually has not seen this letter yet, and that he is respecting his ranking member Dianne Feinstein's request for confidentiality, and he's going to allow the Democrats to move through whatever process they deem appropriate. But we have had no indication that this vote in the committee, to refer it to the full Senate floor, is going to be delayed past next Thursday, September 20th afternoon, which is when it was determined today that vote would be held.
Good afternoon, everyone. You have received the draft SLB for review.
And we're hearing some announcements over the speaker here in a very busy FEMA headquarters. So we're going to let you go, Ali Rogan, and we're going to wrap it up from here. Quite a lot happening in these next couple of days.
And these are the people who, they're not on the front lines. They're on the computer lines and the phone lines who will answer the call when they get calls from the areas that are going to be stressed by this storm over the next couple of days. It's this, as we've heard from everybody, including our own Ginger Z, this is going to be a water event, a flooding event, and we wish all of the folks here and those on the ground the best.
100%. And we're going to be following all of this action and all of the news developments at abcnews.com in the coming days. For David Curley, I'm Rick Klein. Thanks for being here on The Briefing Room.